Greetings, everyone. Welcome to another exciting episode of the Never An Afterthought show. My name is Afolabi Imoukhuede. I'm the author of the book, The Never An Afterthought book, and the anchor for this show, The Never An Afterthought. It's always a pleasure for me to have you welcome us into your homes because I recognize there are millions of channels you could tune into and be enjoying yourself or spending your time. But for tuning into ours, we appreciate that time, we appreciate that gesture, and indeed that investment of your time and money to watch us. And so we do not take that for granted. So yes, it's my pleasure again to welcome you to another episode of our show. Now, what makes it our show? It's that hashtag, the hashtag Never An Afterthought, by which we join and continue these conversations across all our social media channels, Twitter, which is at NAA_book, Facebook and Instagram, which is at NA Afterthought. I always love to read from you. You can always drop me a note at any time. Email podcast at neveranafterthought.com. And last but not the least, utilize the comment section on the platform wherein you're listening or watching me. And we always make it a point of duty to glean your comments and feedback. Okay, so today it's a special edition. On Sunday, April 25, we will be marking the Post-Humous Centenary edition of my hero and indeed my lifelong mentor, Chief Joseph Afolabi Imoukhuede, most excellent order of the British Empire, which is what the OBE means. A lot of you that like to say Imoukhuede Obe as if it's a compound name. It's not. His name is Joseph Afolabi Imoukhuede, and he earned that rank decorated by the Queen of England in 1960, June 1960, ahead of Nigeria's independence, when he was decorated as the most excellent order of the British Empire. So that's what OBE actually means. Yes, that's my dad. That's the man that my siblings and I, 8 of us in total, 7, in addition to me being the last, have the pleasure of calling Daddy. So yes, today's edition is dedicated to him because this is not how we had planned it. We inaugurated an annual lecture on his birthday, April 25, 2 years ago, which was his posthumous 98th birthday, but his 30th memorial of his transition. Now, this man loved April so much. He was born into this world April 25, and he transited this world April 27, 2 days right after, 2 days after his birthday. And so 2 years ago, what we had done was a 2-in-1 celebration, celebrating his 30th memorial and also his 98th posthumous, wherein we then inaugurated his annual memorial lecture. Unfortunately, the COVID pandemic has not enabled us to have last year's edition, and again this year, still that the world is still wriggling in trying to get out of the pandemic, and limited gatherings, limited travel restrictions, and obviously age restrictions as well in terms of trying to keep our elder ones safe. So we have decided to do this, to do this way this year, and we're hoping that as the world returns back to the new normal, we will be able to continue the series. So today's edition of the show, the Never An Afterthought show, is dedicated to this great man that I call Daddy. Those of you who've read my book, you would have seen that I dedicated 2 chapters. And for those of you who read it, it's a good time to comment what chapters did I dedicate to him in my book. But he's such a great man that he got 2 chapters out of my 15 chapters, yes, of the Never An Afterthought book. So you can comment and let me know what chapters, and the winner, or maybe the first 3 winners, because those who have bought the book, I am sure that's an easy peasy, right? But the first 3 winners will get a gift from me. But yes, just also, but for the benefit of the many viewers who haven't bought the book, who are probably just watching us for the first time or listening to the podcast for the first time, and perhaps learning that the show is not just a show in itself, but a show that emanated out of the book, Never An Afterthought book that I had written and published June 2020 last year. I would yield the floor now. The production team will show you a concise biography of him in a few minutes. So catch me again after this clip. Thank you.
Chief J.E. Imoukhuede, OBE, was born on the 25th of April 1921 to Chief and Mrs. Eruaga Imoukhuede. He pioneered the setting up of the civil service structure for the Midwest region at its creation in 1963. Prior to that, he was the only non-Yoruba permanent secretary in the Western region and was confirmed as the first secretary to the government and head of the civil service of the Midwest in 1966. J.E. Imoukhuede completed his secondary school education at King's College, Lagos in 1938 and joined the civil service of Nigeria and the Cameroons as a third-class clerk. He quickly rose to the position of chief clerk, later executive officer in just 1 year by 1939. Mr. Imoukhuede graduated from Trinity College, University of Cambridge with a distinction and a BA in history on a full scholarship in 1949. He would complete his master's degree 10 years later in 1959. Between 1949 and 1959, he attended the one-year Devonshire and Overseas Service course, which was a prerequisite for British civil servants, especially those serving in colonial territories. In 1956, Mr. Imoukhuede was the Agent General for the Western region in the United Kingdom. In this office, he was also the Student Affairs Officer for Indigenes of the Western region and was known to exercise the role with the highest sense of fairness, discipline, and responsibility. He served as the Principal Assistant Secretary deployed to the Premier's office in 1959 and in 1960 was conferred with the honor of the Most Excellent Order of the British Empire. In the same year, Mr. Imoukhuede was appointed Permanent Secretary where he served in the Ministries of Agriculture, Lands and Housing, and Treasury and Establishment. In 1967, during the Biafran War, Mr. Joseph Imoukhuede was abducted by Biafran soldiers along with 3 others: Joseph Adiola, Commissioner of Police; Oluwapata, Permanent Secretary to the Ministry of Agriculture, Midwest; and Samuel Uweni, Officer in Charge, Nigerian Broadcasting Corporation, Benin. They were in captivity for 2.5 years or 888 days before being released at the end of the war in January 1970. After his release and the lifting of the ban on politics by the military government in 1978, Mr. Imoukhuede became active in partisan politics with the Unity Party of Nigeria, UPN, under the leadership of Chief Obafemi Awolowo. Mr. Imoukhuede, along with Chief J.E, Mr. Emmanuel Obahiagbon, Chief O.N. Rewani, and others worked tirelessly to ensure the election of the first governor of Bendel State, Professor Ambrose Ali. He would later serve as special advisor on civil service matters to the governor. Chief J.E. Imoukhuede retired in 1983 to private life and community development. He was a proud Ora man who hailed from Sabongida Ora, Eviobe, in today's Owan West local government area of Edo State. He was a detribalized Nigerian who spoke Yoruba, Beni, Ora, and Igbo fluently, a man of impeccable character and integrity. Chief J.E. Imoukhuede was married to Mrs. Rebecca Imoukhuede, Ni Oni Okpaku, now of blessed memory, and Mrs. Olubumi Imoukhuede, Ni Olushoga, and was blessed with 8 children and several grandchildren. Today, the 25th of April 2019, which would have been his 98th birthday, marks the inauguration of the Chief J.E. Imoukhuede Annual Memorial Lecture in his honor.
Yes, welcome back again. Yes, we took out a few seconds to go show the biography of Daddy. And but for those of you who are just joining us, it's a special edition of our show today, which is dedicated to the legacy of my daddy, my hero, and indeed my lifelong mentor, Joseph Afolabi Imoukhuede. And so from the biography that you've just watched, a very concise biography, the man J.E. Imoukhuede, you'll agree with me, is indeed a great man, both in life and in death. And the reason is simple. His legacy speaks and even continues to speak volumes even after he's left. This This is a man that in preparing a documentary that we used 2 years ago to celebrate 30th year, and just interviewing a lot of a lot of contemporaries. Perhaps it was just one contemporary that we got to interview, who was at that time 2 years ago was 94, because 2 years ago he would have been 98 if he were to be alive. And so you can imagine that a lot of his contemporaries have actually died and gone. But so it was mostly his juniors that we got to interview, those who interacted with him. And, every one of them agreed of the great man that he was, and such that even the attention on the Memorial Day for someone who retired in his lifetime. He had retired from civil service officially in 1971, and obviously also, of course, went then into political life and retired from political life in 1983, and we got to celebrate him in 1998, and still his name still made the huge impact that a lot of people testified to in the documentary. And so what am I trying to do today? I'm actually trying to use the legacy of his life to shape some thoughts around what I call the current happenings for today. And so I've titled this episode what I call the New Tribe. This episode is a new tribe. And why do I say that? I'm saying that it's a new tribe because that is what I believe would require to reclaim and reposition our country and indeed our society. And let me be clear, when I talk about a new tribe, I'm not talking about another tribe, whether Igala, Yoruba, Igbo, Kanuri, Africans, or what have you. I'm not talking about that. I'm actually talking about a people that are bound by a set of common values that promote our nobility, our shared humanity, and as such are dedicated towards our common socioeconomic development. So a new tribe, we're talking about a people that are bound by a common set of values. These values that cut across the fact that we really all should be noble in character. So our nobility, our shared humanity, and because of these set of values, their singular pursuit remains a dedication to championing socioeconomic development for all. Now, this is very germane because these are the attributes that they lived in their times. And I'll read a few excerpts of that book before we close. These are the attributes that the likes of J.E. Imoukhuede and their times lived. And this is what I believed created what we now know as the golden yesteryears. It really shouldn't be about the golden yesteryears. It really should be about the golden today. Now, whilst I do not agree completely that our yesterday is better than today, I clearly cannot agree with that, not even with the technology advancement that we see today, the technology that has enabled us to beat COVID as fast as we are currently beating COVID. But yes, there are still a whole lot from our past that we can learn from. And that's what I'm trying to do today. Now, why do I believe this so strongly? I believe it because last week's episode, we spoke about the importance of the home. And now remember, I said that my hero is my dad and is my lifelong mentor. Now, last week we said this, that charity begins at home. And so many times what you find is that our mentorship should really come from home. It should really come from our parents. And so those of us now, like myself and many of you that are watching me, that are young parents and even older parents, it's never too late to really begin to be that mentor to our kids, to our young ones, and our children, and even whether biological or even non-biological. And so that's what I'm trying to show you, that my mentorship, as much as in the book and in many shows I've described, I've spoken a lot about other mentors, but my lifelong first mentor is my dad, Joseph Imoukhuede. And that already tells you how the home becomes the bedrock of society. all across the book, I also shared many corollaries between himself and what I had also come to do in life myself. Also, last weekend, right after the show, as I tweeted about the book I'm currently reading, which is the book When Character Was King by Peggy Noonan. Now, this is a story about America and Ronald Reagan. Now, this is not a story about Nigeria. And the reason I'm underscoring this is I've said to us many times that the things we share here are common principles, are common values that work so long as we're Homo sapiens. So long as the world is a collection of Homo sapiens, and obviously the nature and the animals and all that make up the planet. And so long as we humans drive this planet, then the reality is that the principles and the values that we share are actually universal. Culture, yes, are different, but principles are universal. And this also underscores why I mentioned that our show has a global audience. So we cannot limit ourselves to just our own geographical space. But in this book, she said something. She said, when character is king. But then she goes on to say something about, she says, when you come from people who have achieved in life, you will tend to absorb the habit of achievement. And she goes on to say, you think it natural to go on and excel. You would actually think it realistic to dream big dreams. Let me repeat it again. It says, when you come from people who have achieved in life, you will tend to absorb the habit of achievement. You will think it natural to go on and excel. And indeed, you will think it realistic to dream big dreams. Now, that is my story. Really. That's a story. That's my story, beginning from the story of my dad. And that's also how, those of you who read my book, that's how I curated the book. My story started from, I started telling my story from indeed the story of my dad. And so you find that because of the fact that I saw my father, my living mentor, and even the mentor, even since his transition, still remains my mentor, and his legacy speaks volumes. It became natural for me. It almost became, I had a personal entitlement to achievement. It became natural for me to want to attain something in life. So you find that what she says is that it becomes natural to go on to excel. It also becomes natural for you. It's just realistic, for you to dream big. Becomes just it becomes a natural reality. And that's why one of the things I've always said, and I say this a lot to a lot of our younger folks, that dream big. There is no sin in dreaming big, but think big, but then you can start small. Because in starting small, what you're doing with starting small is your proof of concept. And just like the clip that was played to us last week, anyone and everyone can have an idea. So really, it's not about ideation. It's about testing that idea. That's a proof of concept. And you don't want to test out with something big. You always want to dream big, think big, but you start small and then you grow it up from there. So you see that Peggy is telling the story of Ronald Reagan. It's an interesting story. I've only just started the book. Telling the story of Ronald Reagan, and I'm finding myself in the story in relationship to my dad. And by so doing, it's also confirming some of the principles and my own personal stories that I've shared often and I continue to share in life. Now, what do I now want to do with this foundation that I've laid? Like I mentioned earlier at the beginning of the show, I therefore want to use his life and legacy as we've discussed in the book, and I would read some bit of it, from the book, to as a set of pointers and perhaps direction to solutions to some of the challenges that plague our today. And what are the few things that I find? In chapter 3 of the book, when we started discussing, which is where, and I'm saying this now because I already have my winners. I'll let you know my winners later. But yes, some of you who answered right, that I discussed him in 2 chapters, and the first chapter is chapter 3. I'll say the answer to the other one later, so that the winners know themselves. In chapter 3 of the book, and when I introduced the story and I spoke about the Western region, a story, obviously, as you also watch in the short biography, started from King's College and then Federal Civil Service, and then they end the scholarship to go to the UK and came back, who continued his work in Federal Civil Service up until 1955, and then was invited by Chief Obafemi Awolowo to come to the Western region and the likes. And of course, in the Western region, agitations for the Midwest region, now known as, formerly known as Bendel State, now known as Edo and Delta states together, the creation of Midwest and things like that. Now, what is common in this short story that I've mentioned? It's about agitations, counter-agitations, and agitations. Now, let's be clear. For so long as this earth, it's populated, again, by us humans, Homo sapiens, which is our biological name, we would always have agitations with us, around us, and about us. So agitations are not going to leave. And agitations would always happen once there are 2 or more people. In fact, each and every one of us, we have internal agitations. So how much more, once there are 2 or more people together, coexisting in a space, you would have agitations. You have agitations in homes. Now the question is, how do we deal with these agitations in such a way that it expresses justice, equity, and fairness? That really is what we should be thinking about, and reforming the process by which we resolve these agitations. Because think about it. Even in the home, it is the reason why some homes break down. It's agitations. It is the reason why, even with agitations, some homes are able to manage themselves together. It is the reason why the politics in some homes is even greater than the politics that is in the workplace or in the country. So the point is, reaffirming what we shared again last week, the home remains the bedrock of society. And everything we see in society is in many ways a reflection of our homes. And how we handle this from, granular from home, also helps. So you realize, because in that short story, Nigeria in itself is an outcome of agitations of our forefathers, who agitated for self-rule from the British colonialism. And we know our forefathers, with our history, has been credited: Obafemi Awolowo, Ahmadu Bello, Nnamdi Azikiwe, and the likes. So, it is as a result of their agitations that we have Nigeria today. Again, in my book, I spoke about Midwest, the agitations of minorities. And so you find that at any point in time, so long as you have people coexisting together, there is majority and there's minority. And so long as you have a minority, there will be an agitation. Now, when the minority gets their way, within that same minority that becomes maybe a majority, there would also be some agitations. It would always remain with us. And so whether it is today, we're agitating for, constitutional reform, agitating for restructuring of our federation, whatever it is that are legitimate concerns or agitations of a collection of people or of an identity, I believe that the agitation in itself is not evil. The agitation in itself is not wicked. However, what we must do is to ensure that there is a process. And one of the things that is noted in my book is how the creation of Midwest is perhaps the only creation of a state entity so far in our recent history of the nation Nigeria that was not as a result of military fiat. That's the only time in our modern history that we had and we utilized the process of a referendum, which you find was a constitutional process. And so, there is no other part of our history that has that. So if we're able to successfully do that in the 1960s, and I think that was concluded in 1963, the process started before 1963, but was concluded in 1963, I think we can borrow a leaf from our past in resolving our current agitations of any form, be it political, be it religious, be it socio-economic. Agitations of any form can be resolved. And it just requires a process that the people will see to be legitimate, the people will see to be fair and to be equitable. But what is evil? The agitation is not evil. But in my personal opinion, what is evil is repressing those agitations. Now, as we learned from last week's episode, when you repress, what you are really doing is you are brooding much greater evil, because the spirit of repression is tantamount to the spirit of deafness and dumbness. And we learned from last week that those two characteristics will lend to a people throwing themselves into the fire and is a type of expression of violence. So I think that what we can learn from our history and even from world history is to really come together as a people to converse. I think history becomes very important, even in our schools, to be restored. And we should not be ashamed of our history. We should be able to openly discuss our history, openly have conversations about our history, which is many times a reflection of our present, and then talk about this in roundtable conversations. And not just talking about it, but also taking actionable steps that are equitable, that are fair, and that are just towards resolving this. Let's take a break, and then we'll come back right after the break.
So when it's my birthday, probably give me 2 naira, I give my brother 1 naira. When it's his birthday, he will give him 2 naira, give me 1 naira.
He was a perfectionist, nothing, no two ways about it. It has to be right. He was honest. He had high integrity.
Very honest. He did his job faithfully.
Quite clearly, he was a man that was brave enough to take in the brutal facts of any situation, take it in, and prefer solutions to them. Secondly, he was a very deep and disciplined thinker.
I thought I was good in writing. That's right. But I found that I would submit a draft to him. He will vet the draft, and by the time it comes to me, the paper will be blue. We will so amend it that he won't know that I ever wrote anything.
I took him as somebody I might regard as a mentor.
They laid the foundation, and we are building on Midwest region to Bender State to Edo State, and we have presently. That means he was head of secretary to government of the present 2 states, Edo and Delta. So the civil service of these 2 states, they laid the foundation for that.
Currently, we are benefiting seriously from his legacies, what he bequeathed to us. The rules we are using currently in Edo State Civil Service are the handiwork of Mr. Imoukhuede.
When the Biafrans came, don't forget they marched through Asaba. But when they got to Benin, they adopted some top civil servants. And that was when Pa Imoukhuede was adopted.
And that was in August of 1967. But as you know, it was a fallout of the Nigerian Civil War. And I think history also has it that the process was in the Biafran attempt to annex the Midwestern part of Nigeria. And my father at the time was head of service and secretary to the military government.
The abduction was for 30 months between August 1967 and January 1970. And one of those abducted actually called it 888 days in Biafra.
I went to visit him alone. And the first question he asked me, he said, Semoji, can you see what this country has become? He said, do you know the kind of opportunities I had when we moved here in 1963 and the entire infrastructure of the Midwest was in my hands? He said, I could have done anything and got away with it. He said, I never thought I would live to see Nigeria become like this. This was in 1989, no, not now.
Then I remembered what he told the officer. Files don't get missing. They use human hands.
There were very many takeaways. The first one you caused me to have is the ability to communicate properly in speech and in writing. You insisted upon it, and I thank you for it.
Those values of accountability, those values of honesty, integrity, hard work, those things that really define a man.
If you're not pushed, you will not innovate. And not being easy to get by, my dad, that is, toughened me earlier on. And I think for that, I thank him.
We love you, and you are in a better place. God bless you. Thank you. Greetings again, and welcome to our show, the Never An Afterthought Show. If you're just joining us, we have been on to a special edition of our show today in honor of my dad, the legacy of my dad, the late Chief Joseph An Afolabi Imoukhuede, most excellent author of the British Empire, which is the OBE after his name, not Imoukhuede Obe. It's Imoukhuede OBE, most excellent author of the British Empire. And so today we are celebrating Post-Humous Centenary of his life. If he were to be alive today, he would be turning 100 on Sunday. He was born April 25, 1921, and April 25, 2021, which is on Sunday, would have been his 100th centenary anniversary. But we do know that he's since joined the Saints Triumphant since 1989. He lived 68 years on earth, but beyond 68 years, 32 years and counting, his legacy still lives on. And he's my role model. He's my hero. And indeed, not just for myself. When I speak about him, I speak not only for myself, but for my other siblings, beginning from my elder brother, eldest Honsi Imoukhuede, who I'm sure is watching as well. Then on to Ajike Oshosonya, which is Ni Imoukhuede, and on to my elder brother again, Edeki Imoukhuede, and on to, of blessed memory now, my other brother, Egenro Imoukhuede, and then I come on to Semoji, I come on to Sionwe, and then Oluwakemi, and then myself. So he's our hero and remains our lifelong mentor, and that's why we thought that we must dedicate today's show in his memory. This is not the way we wanted to celebrate his centenary. We were going to have a pomp and glam celebration, but COVID has rearranged the world, And if the Duke, the Queen's husband, the Duke of Edinburgh, could be buried in such a very quiet manner, then who are we therefore not to follow in that pursuit? So we're using technology today to celebrate him, and as the world returns to normal, which we hope would be in no distant time, we would resume the annual memorial lecture, which we celebrate his life every April 25th by the grace of God. In the book, the Never An Afterthought book, 2 chapters were dedicated to him. I've answered the first one, which is chapter 3, and just before the break, and then I continue now to discuss his legacy and how his legacy can speak to some, how his legacy can, speak to answers or direction to solutions to some of our problems of today or challenges of today. And the second point is really to speak about nobility of character. Those of you who are very close to me and those who have watched our show consistently, this is episode 22, you will note that character is indeed king. Just before the break, I shared a book I'm currently reading by Peggy Noonan, this book, and I also tweeted about it last week, Friday. And the title is When Character is King, or When Character Was King, actually. And that's to say that there's been a shift in somewhat of our values as a people, not just about Nigeria, but in the world generally. And that's why Peggy would write a book, When Character Was King. Now, I've often said that in my view, character is everything. Character, in my view, is the sum total of who we are. And the sum total of who we are is actually a sum total of our shapings and our experiences. But it's often also said that the things you go through they shape us, but they actually really expose who we are. And that's why you find that character, it's a noble thing. Character, it's a fundamental foundation. And those are the ethos the likes of my dad and his ilks left with us. That character is fundamental. So that's the second point that I believe that if we return back to, the dominant value system for which character becomes king, it will help. I just want to read a few excerpts. And this is in chapter 3, wherein I said I dedicated 2 chapters, chapter 3 being one of them. And according to Professor Laokpa, which again he shared as part of his inaugural address, he speaks about my father. He says his ascension to chief clerk and then later to executive officer is a story in itself. And remember, this is the colonial Nigeria. It's a story in itself of commitment and extreme dedication. This is because the positions of executive officer EO and higher executive officer HEO were solely reserved for British officers. Yet, the Colonial Administrative Office was forced to waive the restriction in recognition of the Imoukhuede brilliance. I go on as well to read of another quote by Dr. Sonny Opaise. Is no other but the Surveyor General of repute, and who also rose to retire as a head of service, now in the then Edo State. My father was head of study for Midwest region that comprised both the then Bendel, which was Edo and Delta states as we have it today. But Dr. Sono Okpaise rose to retire as head of service of Edo State. And he says, Chief J.E. Imoukhuede rushed to Benin, and this was when the Midwest was created, and used his car as house and office to work out rehabilitation for the mammoth crowd of civil servants and their families. Those civil servants, like his own father, who had houses in Benin at the time, came readily to help. Indeed, there were 4 very senior civil servants staying with us Indeed, the United African Company, which is what you know now as UAC, through Chief Abebe, spared the UAC building in the GRA for use by the government. The UAC had a strong presence in Benin at the time. Thus, Midwesterners became refugees in their own country. And that's end of quotes. But as the story continues in the chapter, it says to deal with this emergency, now Chief Osadebe, who was the premier and the only premier of the Midwest region at the time, worked with my father and Chief Andrew Wilson to immediately establish the Okwila Cement Company, textile mill at Asaba, glass factory at Ugeli, and many farm settlements all over the region. Now, what does that tell us? It speaks to what we know as industrial settlements. Now, you see, when I talk about nobility of character, and this whole word that is pervaded our shows, hard work, smart work, traditionalist generation of my father believe a lot in hard work, focus, diligence, dogged determination and dedication. Well, our younger generations, whether millennial or Gen Z or my own, we cannot cheat away hard work as well. Hard work is very important, but we have also coined a term known as smart work. But I've often said that the grit to success, the grit to you winning, it's a combination of hard work and smart work. Now, you saw that being displayed as a testament of my father's story, and which is a testament of a lot of everyone that are winners in our world today. And so if you must win, I've said it to us, grit is important. Grit is required to win. But the point to also bring about is industrial settlements. It tells me, therefore, that no nation can win without production. We must be producers. No person can win without producing. You have to be a value creator for you to win. You can't win by being a leech. It's not possible. You can't win by being a consumer of what another has done. Well, perhaps you will win limited in some way. But the real winners, the real gainers, they produce. They are producers. They are content creators. They are industrialists. And so, when we then look into our world today and worry about where we are, whether it is the economics amongst us that is listening or watching the show, or it's the young people in tech, or it's the young people in creativity, or the young people in production, like my young production team, or anywhere you are in the sphere of life, you must be a producer. You must produce. You produce to win. To settle the Midwest in 1963, wherein they said themselves that they were refugees in their own country because of the way they were rushed out of the Western region to go settle the Midwest. The immediacy of ideas that the ilks of my father thought about then were industrial settlements, value creation. And so, if we must win again as a people, as a country, then when we talk about democratizing our production, when we talk about moving our economy away from oil, when we talk about diversifying the economy, they can no longer just be lip service. They must be actionable steps. When we talk about ease of doing business, they must be actionable steps. They must be actionable steps that everyone within the value chain is able to see the benefit. They express their concerns. They see the benefit. Every one of us, every actor, state actor, private actor, public actor, every actor must be concerned about the ease of doing business, because that's the only way we can become production guys. That's the only way we can boost productivity. we can boost innovation, and we can boost development. And so to you all my viewers, especially my young ones watching out there is no shortcut to success. Grit, hard work, smart work, becoming a producer, becoming a creator is critical for you to succeed. Now, will all of us be producers? Absolutely not. That's why it's a value chain. Because in the value chain of production, everyone finds his place. If we were just to simplify production in Economics 101, where we were taught, it says production is about land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. The entrepreneur is the one that puts it all together. So that already tells you about value chain. Somebody will have the land or own the land. Someone will be labor. Another will have capital. And then there is someone who must be ready to take the risk. That's how the value chain comes together. And so we must find our place as originals within the value chain to work together. And that's how we must work together to win together. I think the last point for me as well is renaissance. We must again take renaissance that is rooted in our love for country. And to do that, I've marked again another chapter. Perhaps you may say today is about book reading. Well, perhaps that's what it is as well. But the chapter 13, now that's the answer to my question, the second chapter wherein I celebrated my father, chapter 13, when we talked about sustaining a legacy. And I'll just read a few areas from it. I started that chapter by summarizing, I started by chapter with a quote or with a statement where I said there was a time in Nigeria when money, especially ill-gotten loot, was not the true measure of wealth or societal status. Rather, it was about honor, it was about mutual self-respect, it was about integrity, and indeed a good name. We all grew up learning that a good name is better than riches. And so I moved on in that book, and obviously I spoke a bit about, again, some of the noble character of my dad. And I moved on to say, men who shunned wealth like my father often had to overcome the temptation to make a name for themselves. Therefore, the onus is on us to celebrate people like Chief Joseph An Afolabi Imoukhuede, OBE, since they will not celebrate themselves. It is actually to the society's benefit to do this, because in celebrating men like him, members of the society, especially the youth, may be inspired to follow their footsteps and live a life of service. My father's story can inspire all sorts of people: civil servants, political appointees, politicians, any and every young person, indeed everyone. This is why my siblings and I are committed to hosting the annual memorial lecture on the day of his birth every April 25, as I've spoken about the maiden edition in 2019, to mark his 30th year of transition. Unfortunately, we've not been able to do this again last year, and this year we thought that I will use the platform of this show to celebrate him as well, and hope that post the COVID pandemic we'll be able to resume this annual lecture. However, why the annual lecture? It's not just because we want to just talk or we just want to yap. No. The annual lecture is beyond just celebrating my father. It is also a platform to espouse topics bordering on the 7 attributes of public life. One being selflessness, the other being objectivity, another being integrity, accountability, openness, honesty, and indeed leadership. And this is what I believe is life reflects, and that's what we hope to continue to use to continue to use the lectures to discuss. And it is my hope that by deconstructing the man, J.E. Imoukhuede, and bringing his virtues out in the open for discussion, Nigerians and Africans will desire a renaissance that is rooted in love for country, love for fellow men, and indeed an aggressive drive for excellence in public service. So yes, that is the story. That's the story, the concluding story of the man J.E. Imoukhuede. As I've shared, it is our hope as a family that the JEI Forum will continue to celebrate his life every April 25. This post-pandemic, when the world returns to a new normal, will continue as we've inaugurated 2 years ago. The production team, as I've also mentioned, will share with us clips of last year's, 2 years ago, the inaugural memorial lecture. I don't think it's in the public view. We would post it for you who want to watch it. So today has been a special feature for my dad, J.E. Imoukhuede. Next week, we shall have another special one for my mom. But April is also particularly personal for me as well, because this was a border month for her. It was really in the month of April she began to bid us good farewell and good night. But yes, she transitioned officially May 1st, 2020. And so in a few days, we will be celebrating our own first year memorial. But what I will do is next week, Thursday, we'll have another special feature wherein I would have a guest on set with me to discuss the topic, Are Women, Our Mothers, Silent Achievers? That topic, in my view, epitomizes the woman that I call Sisi, who is my mother of blessed memory, Olubumi Olayinka Okikiola Imoukhuede, Triple O, as I like to call her. And that's how she signed, Triple O Imoukhuede. As such, stay tuned with us. And so till I come your way again, next week, same time, 6 p.m., same day, Thursday, on this same channel, the Never An Afterthought channel. Don't forget to, stay safe so you can keep well and above all, keep winning. God bless you.